Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Quick shout out to my new or updated patrons, Martin P, John B, and Kurt H. Thank you for choosing to support the channel. First up today, we get an interesting report from Bloomberg talking about how the US just crossed the 5% EV adoption threshold. And if data from other countries is any indication, this is a tipping point of sorts for EV adoption. According to a Bloomberg analysis, this threshold signals the start of mass EV adoption. If the US follows the trend established by 18 countries that came before it, hitting that 5% threshold, a quarter or 25% of new car sales could be electric by the end of 2025. Looking at this chart, on the x-axis, we have the number of years after a country crossed the 5% threshold, and on the y, we have the percent of new car sales being full BEV, so hybrids are excluded from this data. And one very important thing to note is this 12-month moving average at the 4.5-year mark is actually higher than Norway's adoption was at that same point in time. Fast forward a bit and you have Norway trending toward 90% BEV adoption after around 8 years. Now, to be clear, I don't think it's fair to assume that just every country that hits this 5% mark is then going to be at close to 90% adoption in 8 years, because you have to start factoring in many other things, not the least of which is production in countries where there are just more people. So here's my question for you guys. With all of that data in mind, let's think about the other side of the coin and some of the challenges that the EV adoption curve is going to face. Things like raw material shortages, semiconductor shortages, production challenges, certain automakers being reluctant to transition to EVs because of lower profit margins and cannibalizing current sales, lack of public charging infrastructure, even if it's just a perceived lack by the mainstream public, oil and gas opposition, and slower mainstream adoption due to a lack of education around EVs. Now, I would love it if you took a second to comment below a number 1, 2, or 3. 1, if you think we're going to see traditional S-curve adoption when it comes to EVs. 2, if you think it'll be somewhere in between S-curve adoption and linear, which would be slower. Or 3, if you think that EV adoption will follow a linear model. This is just something that a few patrons and I have been thinking about a lot lately. Shout out to you, Irvin. So we would love to hear your thoughts below. And don't forget, some of those hurdles for EV adoption really are universal. So even in these countries that have hit that 5% mark and are seeing great traditional S-curve growth, are still facing some of those challenges. And the next 3 countries to join this list should be Canada, Australia, and Spain. In this chart, which is probably screenshot worthy, I just want to highlight China, the biggest auto market in the world. They crossed the 5% full BEV adoption mark in 2018 Q4. So roughly 4 years later, China's new BEV sales in Q1 were 16.7%, which was lower than the average 30% adoption rate at the 4-year mark. Once again, bringing the conversation back to some of the challenges the EV industry will face moving forward. R. Simons on YouTube compared a new Model Y performance from Giga Berlin to a Model Y long range from Shanghai, and there are some new differences. The performance Model Y actually now has a softer suspension than the long range. Historically, the performance has had a firmer suspension, but in this video, they seem to believe Tesla has softened the suspension of the performance vehicle, which would be a welcome change for many, as it should result in a more comfortable ride. The paint and panel gaps look good, on par with Shanghai quality, which has also been very good. The Berlin-made performance does have a slightly better sound system and quieter struts for the hatchback closing system. They did mention currently there is no track mode just yet for the performance Model Y. In case you happen to see this article from Inside EVs, I don't think it's correct. As you can see in the title, they say that Berlin has over 8,000 workers, but if you scroll down, then they say the facility has been growing more and currently employs around 5,000 people. So we know in the future the goal is 12,000. We've been looking for data. As far as we can tell right now, it seems like Giga Berlin has in the neighborhood of 5,000 employees, not yet 8,000. Rob mentioned this one Friday, but I think it's really important to highlight the work of this one man. So Tesla's management in the Asia Pacific region has basically been shifted around a bit, as executives in that region will now report to the Greater China region, where previously those executives were reporting to the United States. This restructuring now means that executives in that region will report to Tom Zhu, who is Tesla's top China executive. So now Tom Zhu oversees Tesla Asia Pacific, a position previously held by a US executive. If you're not familiar with APAC or Asia Pacific, it's kind of a loose definition, but this is generally the region that would refer to. So a big chunk of the world. One reason I wanted to bring up this story is because many people in the Tesla community have actually pegged Tom Zhu to be a potential candidate for Tesla's future CEO role. And second is because he has done such incredible work, and he's one of many Tesla employees that don't get much spotlight, don't get much attention, but are truly foundational to the success of Tesla, especially when it comes to navigating the Chinese market. So there you have it, Tom Zhu. If you didn't know the name before, now you know. Shout out to Tesla Adri, taking one for the team. Drove to Hanover to check out and learn a little bit more about Tesla's solar trailer. Said it's built by trainees at Tesla Automation as a proof of concept. It has 3.2 kilowatts and a built-in Powerwall for storage. Has multiple 230 volt outlets to provide power to other devices. Looking at the images, you can see once opened up, there you have it, the Tesla Powerwall. So I thought that was kind of neat, and built by Tesla Automation trainees. This recent video from Wuwa showcasing Tesla's warehouse in Shanghai is becoming more and more important, especially as Shanghai is flirting with new COVID shutdowns. Not that that's going to happen, but in that event, this would take on even more importance as a place for Tesla to store parts, where if they can't get certain parts from suppliers in the future, they could have some here that would help with some level of production. James Cat on Twitter shared what I'll be calling the money chart, as it shows the best-selling SUVs in the Chinese market over 45,000 US dollars. This is retail sale data for the first half of the year in the Chinese market, once again in the luxury SUV segment. Tesla Model Y leading the way with over 133,000 sales. Second place coming in at 73,000, the Mercedes GLC, which is a hybrid, and there are definitely a few other hybrids on the list. Now, this does say top 15 models, but this screenshot is just the top 10, and you'll note that only 3 cars in the top 10 have actually seen positive year-over-year growth. Of course, the Model Y, the Li Yang 1, and the Neo ES6. This same story is playing out in the United States, and it's going to play out in Berlin once production is ramped up. And I really do think this whole argument that Tesla needs 15 plus different models to be able to compete for real market share in the future will end up in the graveyard with most of the other bear FUD over the years. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm anti-Gary Black. I just happen to be disagreeing with him as of late. He tweeted that he thinks when robotaxis are here that the overall demand for mileage will not increase. And I definitely disagree with this. I personally know plenty of people who will not go on road trips over 10 plus hours because they hate driving and can't spend that much time doing it. But if you could just get in your car and sleep or work or do whatever you wanted to do, true robotaxi, I think the overall demand for mileage will go up significantly. And if this technology really does drive down the cost of traveling that significantly, then how many people will opt to do that instead of flying and dealing with that whole experience? Personally, I'm definitely with Sawyer on this one, but what about you guys? According to registration data, which is just a proxy for sales because registrations can happen in a different month than an actual sale, Tesla's 4-vehicle lineup rose 66% in the first 5 months of this year to 179,500 units, with BMW in second place in the luxury segment with an 11% drop year over year to 133,200 units. The numbers include all models, including gasoline and hybrid vehicles from Legacy Auto. This is yet another data point that shows Tesla really is dominating the luxury market, not just for EVs, but for all autos. And further than that, they're doing it on multiple continents, not just one specific area. This was a cool chart made by Sawyer showing Tesla's supercharger growth since 2012, now with 4,000 plus stations and 35,000 charging connectors, and you can see the slope or the ramp of the growth as of late. I don't want this to feel like I'm just cherry picking data, but the data is what it is. Alex says Tesla sold 3 times as many BEVs in China in June as VW sold IDs. Of course, Tesla only had 2 models. And in all of 2021, Volkswagen sold 70,000 IDs in China, fewer than Tesla did in the single month of June this year. BMW has officially ended i3 production. They're saying that the preference for EVs has changed and now consumers want bigger vehicles. Mazda's new MX-30 is potentially winning the crown for one of the worst thought out electric vehicles out there. Now, to be fair, this is really just in terms of paper specs and performance. Actual driving dynamics can be somewhat fun depending on who you talk to. However, with a starting price around $33,000 for just 100 miles, you can see why this is not off to a hot start, with an all-time sales record so far in March of 101 units. Out of Spec did a review, and you can tell by the title that he was not that impressed. However, once again, to be fair, he did enjoy parts of the driving dynamics, but overall, this car seems like a dud so far. The Rimac Nevera got its official CARB certification, and we're looking at 287 miles of range on a 130 kilowatt hour pack. Remember, range is not the focus for a hypercar. It also has a top speed of 258 miles per hour and a horsepower of 1,914. I hope you guys have picked up that I really try to avoid the word shocking in my titles because it gets so overused and most of the time it's not really accurate. However, this morning when I read this article, I was genuinely shocked that this is real life. This bill is also looking to allocate $50,000 of taxpayer money to destroy existing chargers that aren't in compliance. If you're new, I don't just put anyone on blast, but today we have to do it as Ben Moss is totally out of control with this new proposal. Apparently, the purpose of this bill is to make it fair and equitable for internal combustion engine vehicle owners who currently have to watch as EV owners get the advantage of charging their vehicles for free. One simple issue, let's just say it costs maybe $10 to charge an EV. Well, it could easily cost over $100 to refill a gas or diesel car. If you thought that was bad, it gets even worse. Let's just say you're a restaurant owner in North Carolina and you decided to have a public EV charger outside for your customers as they come to your restaurant. Well, now this bill is saying you're going to have to show each and every customer, even if they didn't use the charger, what percentage of their bill went to paying for the charging station. Clearly, Ben Moss is just totally overlooking the need for our society as a whole to move away from fossil fuels as fast as possible. And to do that, we can help encourage that EV adoption by implementing some of these EV incentives like free charging, which probably should be the decision of that business owner to help spur more EV adoption. We don't need to spend more time on this nonsense, but please tell me, are you as shocked as I am? Elon's sister Tosca recently gave an interview and had this to say about Elon. I'm incredibly proud of my older brother. He's a phenomenon. He's exceptional in so many ways, and his goals to help humanity are beyond anything that anybody can imagine, so there's no taint at all. This taint was referring to Tosca's children watching videos about Elon on YouTube and seeing him being made fun of all the time. This was funny. Elon said to Tosca, "I will give you advice, but if I give you advice, you need to take it. Otherwise, I'll never give you advice again." I happen to like that. And Tosca said, no, he's never wrong, not even a little bit. Speaking of Elon's ability to give advice, not necessarily to predict timelines. Here you have it. It looks like to some degree, new COVID restrictions are being put in place once again in Shanghai due to around 120 positive cases over the weekend. There's really not much being reported on this just yet, but there is increasing concern that authorities will revert to another painful lockdown. Elon tweeted this out about the Twitter deal, which is very funny. All I really have to say about the matter, personally, I actually want Elon to buy Twitter. I would love to see what he does with that platform. Now, I'm not at all worried about what that would mean for Tesla. I think personally, those fears are way overblown. I know many of you totally disagree with me. You're loving this news and hoping that this deal is dead. Either way, it's probably going to be another few months before we have a real resolution, whether it's playing out in court or we go back to negotiations. The point, either way, I really don't think this will have any material impact on Tesla's fundamental business. Now, will it impact the stock price in the short term? Sure, but I don't have any control over that, and ultimately it is what it is. VW came out and said that it would support a subscription or a pay-as-you-go model for autonomous driving, similar to what Tesla is offering in the United States. So whether it's for the next X amount of miles or 1 month at a time, VW seems to be on board with this. Now they just have to get to some level level of autonomy. That'll do it for today. Please take a second to like the video if you did. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.